Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. Amidst the shutdown, lockdown, slowdown, and I guess in the case of NFL free agency, the beginning, we're talking sports around here as much as is necessary and is needed in the coming days and weeks ahead. As you know, I've branched out, and I could talk about more than just sports. And certainly for every Orioles fan last week, the reality came home. I've told everyone it's been 6 years ago this week. My wife was diagnosed on March 20th. And to see what Trey Mancini has gone through, to see him shooting videos from a hospital bed over the weekend, Luke, it certainly does put it into perspective here, what we're talking about for this shutdown and for baseball and for anybody, the loss of sports. Trey Mancini's been through a lot the last 10 days, and I think the organization's been through a lot before this shutdown.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a story that would be a much bigger story within the sports world, if not for the fact that we're talking about such an unprecedented time. But I think one of the more heartwarming moments of the weekend, for me anyway, when you're going through processing a weekend without sports other than seeing some Mexican soccer game matches and a couple things here and there like that, was Trey Mancini taking to social media and posting a short video, smiling, all things considered, looking good. And now, as we kind of await word on what the next steps are going to be for him in his recovery, having a malignant tumor removed from his colon, definitely at a time when we really didn't need any more reminders as far as there being bigger things in baseball, bigger things in sports. This is still something he's very much dealing with, something that those in the organization who care about Trey, whether you're talking management all the way down to his teammates or even minor leaguers following from afar. I mean, it's certainly a very concerning story, but seeing Trey Mancini reach out, thank fans, thank the organization for support on Saturday. A little 30-second video. It was good to see, but it's definitely not a story that's lacking attention because it's not a big story. It's just we're kind of in uncharted territory as far as the sports world right now. But certainly our thoughts and prayers are with Trey Mancini to get well, because we've seen him almost from day one come to the major league level and be a legitimate player, something the Orioles don't have very much of right now at the major league level. So through this delay, this suspension of baseball, suspension of professional sports, we're certainly going to be rooting for Trey Mancini as he battles this thing.
You know, for the shutdown of baseball and all the conversation we've had about the Astros, and I had Matt Thomas on from Houston this week because I've been tracking him down 4 or 5 weeks ago to talk about the Astros situation and cheating and all of that. This little exhale for baseball, I don't know if it's going to be good or bad. Time will tell. You know, a million things have saved baseball over the last 100 years, and, every baseball historian loves to tell you how resilient baseball is and all of that. It's going to be very interesting after friends of ours die and we don't, and we live through this, and 3-4 months from now, all the horrific stuff that's going to happen here, that we start playing games again. I think there is a general belief that there will be an incredible appetite for playing games again when this is done. I mean, come on, Luke. We're on day 1, day 2, first week here, right? Like, this is not a 14-day shutdown, the 8-week shutdown that we heard about on Sunday night. I think this has been spoon-fed to the American people as something that may not be so good, but something that's going to be, it's a pandemic. I mean, Google the word. I mean, there have been no good pandemics in the history of mankind. Seeing people dying by the hundreds, by the thousands in Europe every day. I don't know what the appetite's going to be for sports. I'm sure it's, in wartime and all the things I've read about as far as what people want to put their mind on when bad things happen. They didn't have the internet back in those days. They had books, maybe radio in the 20s and 30s and 40s. This is going to be a whole different era and sort of an inner war here culturally. I'm not sure how long this is going to last. I'm assuming 3-4 months. I'm not assuming it's 2-3 weeks. If I'm wrong, I'm good. I'll go see Pearl Jam, But I don't think it's going to work that way. I am fascinated for baseball to be the most affected, on the front end of the sport at a time when everything was going wrong for baseball and at a time where people think it probably shouldn't be 162 games. It's not going to be 162 games if they play it all this year. What happens to the financial base of all of it? I know Mr. Angelos is still getting his $4 a month from me on the Masson Television Network, but this is a real question for how much we're going to miss sports, concerts, each other, physical contact, restaurants, things that we miss. And, the larger picture of what happens to sports. What does sports look like when this is done?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be really fascinating on the back end of whenever we reach the back end of this thing, whenever we return to some sense of normalcy from a social standpoint. Not to say that normalcy is going to be the same. You and I have had various conversations both on the air and even just having a cocktail in Indianapolis during the Combine or Super Bowl week or what have you. And we've often talked about what stadia would look like in 20 years, in 40 years, in 50 years. And I've often theorized that stadiums and arenas would become much more glorified television studios than having something where you're hell-bent on having a larger capacity. We've already seen baseball, with ballparks with shrinking capacities. The newer ballparks that have been built over the last 5 to 10 years have been trending towards a little less as far as capacity. And not that I was anticipating a pandemic going into any kind of that long-term planning, but I am interested to see what, not so much viewing habits, because I do think people are very much going to be excited to see sports return. I think that's going to be something that's, I can just tell you just from the first few days. Speaking as someone who doesn't watch every single sport every waking hour, but...
Well, you would say, what if it was taken away from you? This is why we fight those wars, and we sing the national anthem for America so we can play our games. And, then this comes along, and then, I never thought about it like that because I have a passport and I see the world, but I know many of our friends, up and down D&L window tinting see it that way. And, I think there's going to have to be a real thought about 90 days from now what we've witnessed and what's going on around us and what's happened to our economy around here about all the things we've been talking about the last 4 years in this country. Where is the vision? Where is the safety net? Who is looking out for the greater good? And, baseball as a community endeavor, as something communities everywhere do, minor league and all of that, I would think that if baseball comes back on July 4th weekend, I would think that this would be the thing that could really help baseball. Not that you need a pandemic to help baseball, but I think if you want to bring people back to stuff, make them miss it, make them long for it, but then when they come back, what's waiting for them when they come back? For the Orioles who, and I said this as a little levity with Alan McCallum earlier, they were trying to figure out a way that they couldn't lose 100 games. They figured it out, Luke.
Yeah.
They won't lose 100 this year.
Right.
I lost the bet.
But I would also say on the flip side, I'd gladly take a 100-plus loss baseball team compared to not having any baseball at all. And the point I was trying to make, even acknowledging, I'm not a big hockey guy. I'm not. I'll watch the lacrosse Final Four. I'll watch some big local matchups from time to time, but I'm not a big lacrosse. But it's always there. When you're home on a Saturday afternoon or you're home on a Thursday evening, right, and you're not quite ready to go to bed yet, you turn on ESPN or try to find something. You tune in SportsCenter, you watch some highlights. Even just going to various websites. You can go to WNST.net right now and click on the MLB page, and you see all the spring training games canceled for a given day, just canceled. And it's very jarring to see. And baseball specifically, anyone who's a baseball fan, anyone who, from the diehards who watch every single night to those who are a little more casual, the one thing you know about baseball is what? It's there every single day. I mean, there's, other than the weirdness that you have with the All-Star break, and we always think about that Wednesday and Thursday after the All-Star break as being the deadest days on the sports calendar over the, but even those days there's something going on in the world, but we're now in a time where that's just not the case right now. So I think there is a sense of wondering what it's going to look like and how much appetite there will be. And I think the appetite will be there for everything for at least a short period of time. But at the same time, understanding social ramifications of something like this occurring in our country and in the world, quite frankly, and certainly the economic ramifications for this, it will be interesting to see how it's consumed. Is attendance what the sports will want it to be at that point, knowing how much, not that I'm losing any sleep for billionaire owners by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm also very cognizant of...
Well, who pays the price for the billionaire owners? I mean, Zion Williamson's going to pay the employees, not the owner of the Pelicans? I mean, it's insane.
Sure, but I guess my point is I'm not so worried about the billionaire owners one iota, but the stadium workers and people that I know at Camden Yards, people that I see at M&T Bank Stadium for every Ravens game. Those.
Well, I've been at this 30 years, right? So I've seen strikes and lockdowns and lockouts and lock-ins and shutdowns, and and what it affected was, quite frankly, friends like mine, like Chris Pica, who worked at the Saints after Katrina. You know what I mean, or during Katrina, quite frankly, and it affects the rank and file employees. It doesn't affect the Joe Flacco on the payroll. It affects the people we deal with every day who don't really have a job anymore because there ain't any baseball anymore. There ain't any football. Well, football's the different. I mean, we keep going back to this, and Calais Campbell over the weekend and free agency and all that. Football is really the sport that's – all the rest of this is in shutdown. Football's like, hey, as long as this thing passes in the next 5 months, we're not going to lose a nickel.
Yeah, well – the drafts, the draft's not going to go down in the way that we thought it might be able to. I mean, you're talking about the draft being a little over a month away.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed Goodell's not going to get thrown in the water at Bellagio.
Right.
But yeah.
So they're definitely, but you're right. In comparison to the other three major professional sports, in comparison to what we're seeing with, I mean, we're not talking about the NCAA tournament right now. I mean, I was sitting down to have some dinner. Got some takeout with my immediate family over the weekend. On Sunday around 7 o'clock, I said to my brother-in-law, the selection show, we'd be talking about the brackets being unveiled right now. So it's definitely strange in that way. But I think you do really look at people that are being hit. And look, this goes so far beyond the sports world. We'll continue to remind ourselves of that. But, I mean, I already know people, whether it's stadium workers, whether it's people in the media that are kind of piecemeal together their livelihood with freelance opportunities, and they're scrambling. And there are lots. We're all going to know people like that, or it's going to be it's either going to be ourselves or people that we know. I mean, that's what everyone's dealing with right now. So it's tough in that way. But as you kind of think about sports right now, yeah, I mean, the NFL ended up being the lucky one in terms of not losing games. We think. I mean, certainly that's a long ways away. We'd all pray and hope that by then things are moving in a positive direction long before then. But it's very strange to kind of think about this. And we talked about this a few days ago, kind of trying to draw some semblance of similarity with 9/11. But even with 9/11, after the first couple initial days when everyone was so scared and we were trying to figure out what the new normal was going to be like, there was very much, I think, an understanding or an expectation that sports and concerts and live theater and things of that nature that so many of us enjoy, so many of us consume on a very regular basis, would return sooner rather than later. It'd be a week. It'd be 10 days, 2 weeks tops maybe. With this, it's just, I mean, I don't even want to speculate at this point because I'm not qualified to speculate. I mean, I know what the CDC has already said about 8 weeks for large group activities. So, and baseball and the other sports maybe it was the Rudy Gobert coronavirus positive test that was the catalyst, but they're at this point they're taking their cues from the CDC. So, what does that mean? Does that mean late May? Does that mean June? Does that mean July? I don't know. Again, I have no idea, but this is going to impact a lot of people, not just from a morale standpoint. I mean, that's kind of at the bottom of the list. But when you think about how many people, local businesses around stadiums, around arenas, so many people depend on these events to go on for their livelihood, and for that to just be at a screeching halt now and having no real clear idea when it's going to pick back up again. I mean, it's just it's a really scary thing. So, to go back to your original question, the thirst is going to be there. The appetite is going to be there whenever it does come back. But how much damage is done in the meantime, and how might that impact how we consume these events, whether we're talking sports, whether we're talking concerts, or anything of that nature.
I remember when I was pissed when Pearl Jam went down. Now I'm just like, maybe I can get to the Stones tour, but the Stones are probably going to bang their tour any day. So
again, anything in the short term. We have church services that aren't being held.
Oh, no doubt.
Right. I mean, it's just some of the just most fundamental, basic human gatherings that we have in our society right now are compromised. I mean, we all have our favorite restaurants around town, that we love going to eat, and at this point, many of them you can go get some takeout, but that's it, and that's what's best. I'm not complaining about that.
Well, I hope everybody does, keep our businesses in business, especially the businesses that keep us in business. I hope Royal Farm stays open. I'll be pumping my gas there. I hope we can go over to Pizza John's at some point and bring home a pizza. I'm partial. I like to grab the ones in the lobby and bring them home and dress them up myself and do them all up on my pizza stone. But I just hope we don't fall apart in that way. And I hope people do take this seriously. I mean, I saw over the weekend people weren't taking it seriously, and there's been some social shaming of those people. I'm not going out. My wife ran out to the store briefly, in and out and home, and we're staying completely safe, and obviously what my wife's been through. But for everyone out there, the more education, the more time spent on your couch educating yourself about viruses, the more you'll know. Because clearly, I hope we all understand more than the idiot running the country. I'm tired of seeing non-experts. It kind of reminds me of someone that doesn't know anything about baseball talking to me about baseball, right? So I would hope that the experts really come to the forefront here, and that everyone learns a little bit more about viruses and bacteria and how they're transmitted. I certainly learned that 6 years ago this week,
Sure. And I think and I apologize for not remembering the individual's name, but I believe this was a clip that had been on BBC at some point in recent days. I saw it on social media. And look, I'm not a medical expert. I'm not going to pretend to speak with any sense of authority, but the piece of advice was, we're all kind of looking at this from the standpoint of not wanting to get the virus, and this piece of advice was to change your day-to-day interactions and your day-to-day activity as though you had the virus and you don't want to spread that to others. And I thought that was something that spoke to me, that resonated with me, and believe me, I've watched more news over the last 7 to 10 days than I probably had in the month before that. And I'm not necessarily proud of that. I'm just being honest with you.
You're a guy that wants to educate yourself, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
and I'm not looking for heartwarming stories or gut-wrenching stories. I'm looking for the truth. That's where I am. That's why I went to college. That's why I'm on the radio. That's why I'm trying to get the best guests. I don't like liars. I don't like frauds. I don't like charlatans. I do not like Donald Trump. He is all of the above, and I see it as such. And I see how foolish the words are and the meaning behind the words, that we need to get facts here, and we need to get them quickly. And the facts are coming from the other side of the ocean, where I have a dear, dear friend of mine who I knew 30 years ago, and we spent a lot of time watching baseball games together. She lives in Italy, and I mean, what's going on in her neighborhood is it was eye-opening to me 2 weeks ago, and now it's here. And this was preventable, predictable, all of the above, but it only comes when you trust science, when you believe facts, and when you have good judgment and good reason to delineate what's a fact and what's fiction. And, a lot of this speaks to sports. Who knows what they're talking about and who's covering the game from a basement somewhere, who's talked to the coach, who has inside information, who has facts, and who is just mouthing off on the internet. And there's been a lot of that in the last 15 years, message rooms, chat boards, fake news, what can kill you, what can't, all sorts of hoaxes. This guy died, but he's alive. I've lived through all of that in social media. This is no joke. This is a pandemic. I need facts. I don't need your grandmother's opinion or Archie Bunker's opinion at the side of the bar.
Well, and I think more than anything else, not to even get into that part of it too much.
Well, that part of it lives on my timeline, and it's dangerous.
Well,
it's dangerous.
But this is where we all need to have personal accountability. I look at it from. I was saying this to my sister and my brother-in-law over the weekend that I want baseball to be able to come back. I want football to go on without a hitch in the fall. I want the NBA and the NHL to be able to finish some semblance of a conclusion to their season that is pretty deep. They're pretty deep into at this point. I want to be able to go to concerts again. I want to be able to go to the movie theater again. And all of those things don't happen if we don't, as individuals, not pointing the finger at anyone or wondering whether is this overblown, is this too much, is this over. Look, I don't know what the answer to all of those questions, but I do know if I do my part and if everyone else does their part as individuals.
We get to go see the Stones.
We get to do these things. And you know what?
We get to go to Pearl Jam again.
And if we do all these things, a lot of people will say potentially, wow, that seemed like it was an overreaction, and that's the point. That is the point of this. If this is all done and we take responsibility as individual citizens, we're going to be able to get back to those activities sooner rather than later. Now, I don't know what sooner means as far as weeks, months, whatever, but it certainly will be sooner than later then. But that's where we all have to take the individual responsibility. And even if we have questions or even if we are uncertain or even if in the back of our mind we're wondering, is this all really necessary, that's where you do have to defer to the expert. And at the end of the day, I would much rather be asking the question of, was that all an overreaction when it's over and we're on the other side of this thing, rather than to not react accordingly, not do enough, and this lingers on. And at that point, we're not worrying about Major League Baseball or the NFL kicking off, or we're worrying about people in our daily lives, our family, our friends, losing loved ones. That's a much graver, that's a much more serious thought than worrying about baseball. And that's speaking as someone who loves baseball and has since I was a baby. Since I was a toddler, I've watched baseball. So again, we all do our own part as much as we possibly can, in understanding that there are very real concerns that people have as far as being able to work and provide for their families. But as much as we can all do individually, it's just going to make it that much better in the end. So that's my pitch. Speaking as someone who doesn't know the science behind it, doesn't understand the medical realities, but I've heard enough experts over the last a couple weeks to understand that.
Dude, my wife's had leukemia twice and 2 bone marrow transplants. If you think I really understand what happened to keep her alive, I don't. I own a radio station. I don't know how the tower makes the little thing in your car work. I just respect it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to explain, every part of this. The doctor said, put the mask on and Purell at the front door, and if you bring a germ in here, it will kill your wife.
Right.
Don't do it. So I elbow bumped people for 2 years, and some people still felt like they had to come up and hug me because they were Italian or they were Greek or they were Latin or they just wanted to hug me or, trying to get people to understand that 6 years ago was very difficult. You know why? We're a society of show me, show me, show me, right? You can't see the virus, right? It's not that we all walk around with a green cloud around us if we're infected. That's that's the game. That's the thing you can't see that you have to believe in. Blind faith, trust, religion, all of these things that involve that, right? That's where we are. And I don't think people that didn't have a wife with leukemia and 2 bone marrow transplants. Luke, I didn't understand this 6 years ago this week, right? My wife gets cancer. Sure. I did not realize that, like, why I had to wear this mask everywhere, and you saw me wearing it everywhere, and it was to protect her, that any mall I walked through could have had. She couldn't eat a piece of cheese. Right. I mean, literally, a piece of meat would have killed her at that point, right? So, you know, we're into a dangerous space here, but I sort of remember it sort of spookily and weirdly about the shutdown and the lockdown and the elbow bumps and don't breathe on anyone and don't let anybody breathe on you. And that guy just sneezed. Don't walk over there. Don't shake that guy's hand. All of that and touching elevator buttons in the hospital and the stuff that you do. I would just say that it's all come back to me 6 years later, and now it's for everyone in society to play by those rules. And they're really weird and awkward for people who like to touch and shake hands and kiss and hug and share space, and we're all crowded in it together, and we all like to be in crowds. We're social creatures. You know, it's why we go to ball games, right? So this is going to be a real test in the same way it was a test for me 6 years ago to get your mind around this is the new reality. We have to stay home now.
Yeah, I mean, we're depending on each other. It's that simple. You know, it was strange. On Sunday was my mom's, would have been her 40th wedding anniversary with my father, who passed away 16 years ago in November. And, you know, I wanted to give her a big hug and kiss, and I didn't, though. You know, I'd said to her, I want to give you a big hug right now. But, you know, I'm trying to do this and just get used to this with everyone. And but we're depending on each other. And in the same way that I can think of good times celebrating, you know, Ravens and Orioles and Terps, you know, yesteryear and all those times where you're hugging and high-fiving strangers. And, you know, certainly we could debate whether at the time whether that was even smart to really do. But, you know, if we can get back to, I want to get back to a point where we're not thinking about the ramifications of that like we are right now. And what that means in the interim is making those sacrifices and thinking of one another. So, you know, it is what it is, and that's not to say that anyone should be happy about it. It's okay to be upset about it and unsettled about it, but, you know, we can still communicate. We can still talk. There's texting. There's Skype. I mean, there's so many different ways.
I even have AM radio. It's true.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there are still ways, and all this stinks right now. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you know, sports are my livelihood. You know, but I know that there are much more important things going on in the world right now that we all do our individual part, and we think about not even so much ourselves if we're the healthy one, if we're not in that at-risk group, fine, but it's everyone else around you. It's your grandparents, it's your parents, it's your neighbor down the street who is a cancer survivor. You know, it's all of those individuals that we need to be thinking about, and we do that, then that's that much sooner we'll get back to some sense of normal, and we'll be talking about the Orioles and Ravens and the Terps next season and all of that. So I want to get back to that point. So that's why, you know, me personally, I'm adhering to those things, even though I'm, you know, a 36-year-old healthy male. You know, so I'm not in that at-risk group, but I'm taking this thing seriously because I know that I can just as easily pass this on to other people, and that would be a major problem.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. We are monitoring the baseball that's not being played, the college basketball pools that we're not in, the hockey I'm not watching, the concerts I'm not going to, and we're all in it together. So I will continue to provide conversations with the best people I know, the smartest people I know about all sorts of things. The Baltimore Positive train will continue on. We'll continue to monitor the elections and everything that's going on. That's it. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. Stick with us. We're all in it together.